Welcome back to Brain Bar. For those of you just joining us, my name is Sid Murthy. I will be your host for this next segment. So let's talk about climate change, but specifically, what can companies do to combat it? A little bit about me, I actually work in the corporate world, and I have to hope that companies are actually doing the right thing rather than just greenwashing. I need that kind of hope. The way this conversation is going to go is that it's a one-on-one discussion, but you guys have a say. So if you have a question or a comment, leave it in the comment section. I will ask it live to our speaker. So let me introduce the speaker. He is the global leader of sustainability services at Deloitte. He's been working in this field for the past couple of decades, and he's here to hopefully offer a little bit of hope into what institutions can do to combat climate change. So please join me in welcoming our guest, Eric Dugelay.
Thank you.
Eric, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you so much for letting me be with you virtually. I hope, I wish I had been able to come to Budapest to be
absolutely.
with you physically, but...
Where are you joining us from?
I'm in my office now. This is, my office is in Paris.
Oh,
and,
Paris, beautiful.
Yeah.
There's worse places to be, I gotta tell you that.
Yeah.
Well, I gotta ask you first, what can institutions and companies do that governments just can't?
Well, good point. I think the best would be that governments and companies work together. But I wouldn't be against what you just mentioned. Companies can do a lot. I'm a member of the TCFD, which is the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. And this is chaired by Mr. Michael Bloomberg. This is a purely industry-led initiative. And it's only the companies that work together from the financial industry and the non-financial industry to try and contribute to saving the planet, if you want. So I completely take your point. By the way, if you remember, the corporate world was asked by Mr. Michael Bloomberg to actually continue the journey in the United States to save the planet in the United States once the new president was elected. There might be a federal government in the United States that goes one direction, as long as the companies goes in another direction, that the companies can save the planet. Yes, absolutely. And they have been working very hard for many, many years now to, well, we call it save the planet, but basically to limit their greenhouse gas emissions and to limit their impact on the environment at large. And actually, what is very interesting in the task force that I belong to, which again is the TCFD, is that the angle of that particular task force is companies should also be aware of themselves. Climate change is going to affect them positively and negatively. And there will be risks, such as physical risks, transition risks, that would adversely impact them, but there will also be opportunities. So why do companies do this? It's not just for the sake of saving the planet, I can tell you. It's also because it brings them a lot of value to get adapted to what the future will be because of the climate change.
I think that's a great starting point. So in the audience, I know that you're going to have opinions on this, so please feel free to share them with us. Eric's job over here is to be poked by you guys, and let's see if he can poke you right back. So Eric, what I want to ask you is, what does success look like for you in your role on a day-to-day basis? I know that you have a very senior position. So how can you, at the end of the day, say, okay, today I did X, Y, Z to combat climate change on a corporate level? What does success look like for you?
Yeah, I think, as you said, I've been in this 20 years now as a partner with Deloitte. One indicator for me that we're on the right track is that Deloitte themselves, sorry for doing a little bit of soft advertising, Deloitte has decided to embed sustainability in its strategy globally. And this is my team, actually, that is piloting this for Deloitte at large. Deloitte is 320,000 practitioners whose only asset is their brains, all right? And we decided that our strategy to advise our clients, our strategy should be led by the impact we make on the world, the sustainability at large. This is only one example, but what I think is a good indicator that we are going in the right direction is all these action plans that my clients are undertaking, or also the ones that are not my clients, by the way, but the financial sector and the industry at large. They are making huge investments in the green economy, if you want. Namely, they are changing their processes. They are changing their service offering. Obviously, you take an industry such as the automobile. Have you seen all the changes that took place over the past decade in the automobile industry? This was actually because of the client request for greener cars. Otherwise, those automobile manufacturers would just have been dead if they had not, complied with the new will or the new willingness of the clientele, if you want. So I see a lot happening, and being the father of three, I like when they go on the street and they demonstrate and they shout 2 degree, 2 degree, 2 degree. That is good. If I had time, I would go with them, and sometimes I do. However, what is not correct is to say that we have not done anything so far. The companies have done a lot already. They are on the good track. But it's always, when you're a businessman, businesswoman, it's always a decision that you have to take to invest in a new field or to divest an existing field, even more painful. And it's you don't take those decisions like that by just deciding to save the planet. You just analyze. You get somebody to do the net present value of the project of divesting. You do this very professionally, very scientifically, as much as possible scientifically. You try and put figures on this, and then you decide. But so my role is to bring some, inputs so that decisions are science-based. It's a jargon now. The jargon is science-based. Everything should be science-based. All right.
I think that ties in very nicely with our first audience question. So this is about how change can be affected. So Chenge Shavanya asks, good morning, Chenge. She asks, what do you think? Should governments force corporations to act more responsibly, or should customers push them? Where does the change get affected from?
Oh, it's a very interesting question. I've given an example where the clients pushed for the change in the automobile industry. The government can do a lot to push companies to change. Absolutely true that I've seen changes even more happening whenever there was a new regulation. That is for sure. All right. So you take one example, in the European Union where we are now, in 2014, there was a non-financial reporting directive, which was translated into local regulations in the 21 member states. And this brought a lot of new thinking in the brains of companies. This all came from regulatory pressure. That particular directive, by the way, is being reshuffled so that the TCFD recommendations will be actually made mandatory in the European Union. So companies will have to do a scenario analysis by law in the coming years. So that is going to be a very big example of a big push by regulators on the companies. But I tend to believe that the best to make things change is the client at large, the population. I talked about my children and the other children, the young people, the buyers, the end users are the ones that are pushing. And if they refuse a certain company because of the lack of ethical behavior vis-a-vis climate, etc., of a company, then the company is dead.
Right. Well, the push is at the beginning of the story, and then the action is in the middle. But what about the end? How can you get the regular consumer to trust the company or the institution when there's a pretty general belief that we're in this position climate-wise because of companies and institutions? How can you kind of win that trust and credibility back?
Yeah, that's interesting. Do they really believe that? Yeah, they should. Oil and gas producers have been pointed Coal extracting companies have also been, let's say, pointed by the NGOs. The end is the end of that particular rivalry, if you want, between the users and the guys who manufacture. And the users use the things that the guys manufacture is probably stakeholder engagement, a better stakeholder engagement process whereby there is more dialogue. I've seen this happen big time, for instance, in the oil and gas industry. The oil and gas industry has a terrible reputation, but they're also the guys who have the most advanced level of dialogue with NGOs and unions and activists and always difficult dialogue.
Well, this is kind of what I was talking about in the beginning, because I mentioned greenwashing, which is companies saying, you know, we're so green, we're so sustainable, we really care about the environment, but meanwhile, they're not really changing their practices on a fundamental level. So what you're saying about oil and gas companies being in touch with NGOs, that sounds like greenwashing to me. What are they doing to actually make a fundamental change when it comes to combating climate change?
Yeah, there is indeed a lot of greenwashing on this planet. That is for sure. And there has been, let's say, there has been even more greenwashing in the past, where companies would decide to belong to a specific think tank to, in a way, buy some goodwill, because it's a think tank whose objective is to make the planet greener. And as they belong to it, or even they give money to it and they are sponsored, then they buy their good faith and they pretend to be green. That's absolutely true. I think it's very good that the NGOs and the general population and the buyers and the end users, etc., actually check the figures and check the approaches, check the methodologies. You know, in order to pretend to have achieved a certain level of impact, you need to come back to the calculations and you need to describe what you've calculated, etc. It's good that somebody in front of you checks on your figures and checks on your assumptions, and because it's so easy to pretend that you, for instance, are climate neutral, and in fact you're a huge polluter. For the reason that you announced that you're a carbon neutral company because you just purchased some credits pertaining to other projects that are a positive project vis-a-vis GHG emissions. But your company does emit a lot of CO2, but however, you purchase credits, and so it balances, and by the end of the day, it's equilibrium, and they call it carbon neutrality, right, which is absolutely stupid. All right, so there is a huge difficulty because there is not one standard, there is not one way of calculating things, and it will be a very big challenge to actually have a common language on how do you calculate the future impact, because future is the future. You don't really know what the future is. And so when I see the United Kingdom or my country, France, announcing to the world that they are going to be, or we are going to be carbon neutral in 2050, I say, oh, come on, you should add the assumptions, right? Because otherwise you are fooling everyone.
I think that transitions nicely into our next question. So Paul Berthold, morning Paul, he asks, what do you think how transitioning to greener policies will affect the corporate world? Like, what impact will it leave on their bottom line or their employment?
It's interesting. There have been a lot of studies on the impact on employment of the various crises. There have been, in the context of the existing sanitary crisis, but there have also been in the field of climate change related changes in the company. Again, difficult to answer like that, but there's a huge benefit that can be materialized in the companies if the challenge of climate change is taken in a certain way, which is identifying the opportunities and making sure that you recruit in the fields of the new products, the new services, and maybe the new services, the new products will generate more jobs than would be lost in those services that are divested. And it is very interesting to see that, again, the TCFD, I know it's very jargonic, but the task force I belong to, right, which is going to be having an impact. The companies who report according to the lines of the CDP, the Carbon Disclosure Projects, there are 7,000 of them. They came up with a calculation of all the monetized impacts on the 7,000 companies who describe the risks in euros and the opportunities. And when you add up all this, there are more opportunities than there are risks. So this is based on what the 7,000 companies reported. It's a very clear, positive signal that you can have more opportunities than risks if you really get prepared for the future. And that obviously has an impact on employment. But otherwise, if you just do your job as is, as we call it in the consulting world, you would obviously have to lower your manpower. You would have retrenchments. You would have unemployment. Yeah.
Well, we have one final audience question. This comes from Edwa Zambo. Zambo, that sounds like how you say hello in Swahili. So, Jambo, how do you see young people handling their responsibilities regarding climate change?
I see it very positively. I think the Greta Thunberg effect is absolutely amazing. It's a young lady, and she not only managed to make an impact, but she also managed to embark the younger generation. But it's not only, her initiative has been advertised so hugely that at the end, maybe there has been some form of rejection by some people who got annoyed by all this noise. I think it's all the individual young people are, one with the other, all together. They would bring the change, because they would just say no to certain products and services.
It's ultimately a message of hope, right?
Yes, absolutely.
That's great. Eric, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for your time. You've made me feel a little bit better, at least, about being in the corporate world. You in the audience, thank you so much for participating with your audience questions. Make sure you download the BrainBar app and check out the future jobs to see what amazing opportunities you can take advantage of in the future. And stay tuned, there's going to be a fierce debate between a vegan and a meat eater. But before that, the R&B and soul superstar, Tilde, has something up her sleeves, so let's check that out. Eric, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.